Oh. Hi, I'm Nick Speed, and you've joined me today on the Stainforth and Keadby canal. Beautiful stretch of the Kel, just on the outskirts of Thorn. As you can see, really cold morning, ice on the surface, but nevertheless we're still going to have a good day's fishing, and today I want to show you how to catch a nice net of roach in these kind of conditions in the winter. Hi. Well, as you can see, I've got my box settled down now, nice and comfortable at my peg. It's took me a while to do my peg out because it's only thin ice, but I've still got to do a good job of it. So as you can see, I've done a nice area up to 13 meters and just created a space in my peg where I can feed at least 2 lines. And the beauty about this canal, it's quite a deep canal and it's quite level. So my main intentions are to, obviously catch roach on a short line and a long line, but trying to minimise time by not picking up a different rig for each line and actually using the same rig for each area that I want to feed. So I'm actually spending more time in the water actually catching fish rather than wasting match time having to come back and pick another rig up. So now I've done this, my next step is to sort my ground bait out. So obviously I need to prepare that in advance while it's resting and everything. I can then get the rest of my tackle ready. So it's time to get my ground bait sorted. Right, so I need to sort my ground bait out now. I can sort my tackle out later, but the key thing is get my ground bait mixed up, let it rest for a bit, and then I can concentrate on my other items of tackle. And then throughout the duration while I'm preparing, I can keep attending to my gear, my ground bait mixers, and just fine tune them, add a bit of water to them if I need to. But this is a key area. But obviously, this is the main part, how we're going to catch the fish, feeding the ground bait. So get everything right and it improves your catches. So let's talk about the ground bait first. So this is one of the mixes, one of the bags, part of the mix I'm going to be using. Silver X Roach. Really good ground bait, good roach ground bait, good silverfish ground bait. In fact, I won a festival using this on the River Vaughan on the Vaughan Canal in Holland, a couple of years back. So it's not just for roach, it's for all kinds of species. And along today, I'm going to mix it with equal quantities of Frenzied Hemp, match black. Now, it speaks for itself. It's full of hemp. Roach love hemp. I'm going to do a few little tweaks with it, and I'm going to show you that in the process when I'm mixing it up. But these two mixes combined are absolutely awesome for roach fishing on any style of natural fishing, and also commercials if you want to catch silvers on commercials. So let's go through the ground bait. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to riddle the ground baits. So I've got 2 riddles here. I've got a coarse riddle and a really fine one, and what I'm wanting to do is remove some bigger particles out of the ground bait so there's less food content for the fish, which means that they can concentrate on feeding with what I'm going to be feeding in the ground bait, which is mainly joker. So first of all, open the bag up and just pass it through the large riddle first. Give it a nice riddle. And you can see the shells that are remaining. Just remove those. Now there are times when those big shells you can use in your mix, and that's in the summertime when it's a bit warmer and you're trying to attract bigger fish into your peg. But today, obviously, the size of the fish we're concentrating on, we don't want big particles like that. So we've removed that, and now what I'm going to do then is pass it through a fine riddle, which will just remove just a few more particles out of the ground bait and turn it into a really fine mix. As you can see, it's a lot harder for me to get it through because the riddle's so fine. But the end result is a lot need to mix. So that's actually what's left. So you don't have to throw that away. It can be used for many situations, as I've said, in the summertime when the water's warmer, or if you wanted to add it to, you know, on the festival, when I won the festival on the Vaughan Canal, I added that to my mix after I'd mixed my ground bait and it was damp. So I've actually, in a way, added dry particles to my ground bait, and in the process of throughout the match, they rose up through the water, and I caught fish higher up in the water column. So there's little tweaks that you can do to your ground bait without actually just getting it straight out of the bag and adding water. Just a little bit of thought and using the ingredients with a little bit more, you know, knowledge, I suppose. So that's the Silver X Roach. Now, the end result of that is a really fine mix, as you can see now. And in that mix, you can see loads of kernels, and as well as the Frenzied Hemp holding a lot of hemp seeds, so does the Silver X Roach. And it's just a perfect mix. Nice dark colour as well. This is the time of the year where the canals are really clear. We don't want to be using a bright coloured ground bait. We want to use a dark coloured ground bait. So when it's on the bottom, it blends in with the canal, the lake, the river bottom, which means that the roach feed a lot more confidently over it. And by that I mean that they feed more confidently because they're not going to get spooked by pike. Whilst ever you feed a dark ground bait, it's harder for the pike to actually see the fish feeding because they're not causing a shadow over the bait. If you were to use a light mix on a day like today in the clear water, you'd find you get a lot more pike problems because obviously it's more, the fish are more visible for the pike to attack. So the next mix is Frenzied Hemp, and again, generally all I do is I add 50-50, equal quantities of each is the best mix I've found for roach fishing. More or less the same colour, nice dark mix, and as I've said before, again holds a lot of hemp. Again over a fine riddle now. Give it a nice shake over. There we go again. They're the particles that we want to remove. So now what I want to do is just give it a blend together. So before I mix it wet, I want to evenly mix both bags, you know, so I've got to mix as much as possible. Take a nice whisk around. Now it's time to add the water. So, got some water here, just take the ice off. Shows how cold the water is. And what I want to be doing is adding the water while I'm actually mixing it with the bucket. So I hold the bucket between my knees and gradually add some water. Now the key with this is not to add too much at a time. You can always put some in, but you can't always take it out. So just take your time when you're mixing your ground bait, just to get it right. And of course, by doing it when you first get on the bankside means you've got plenty of time to make adjustments to it and add a little bit more water if you need to, rather than getting all your tackle set up and then rushing around last minute trying to get it all ready. Give yourself plenty of time so you end up with a really good quality mix. Now I've started to add some water here, and you can see that it's just starting to come together now, but it's going to take a little while for all the water and for the ground bait to absorb that moisture. Flat battery. Lucky I've got a spare one. Here we are. Right. Right, so I've roughly mixed that together. It's more or less got the right amount of moisture in it now. I'm just going to let that rest for a bit, and then I'm going to pass it through a riddle, which is going to separate, get rid of the lumps, add a little bit of air to it and fluff it up. And then after that, it will give me a true reading of whether I need to add a bit more water to it, which in the long run, maybe in 20 minutes time, I will have to add a little bit more water to it just to make it bind a bit more. So that's the first step. Right, now the ground baits mix, we're going to let that rest for a bit. But also, although these ground baits do contain low feed content, I want to fine it down a little bit more. And as cold as what today is, I might only be feeding 70% ground bait, but I still want to bulk the rest of the mix out with a neutral binder and a way of delivering my bait down there without actually feeding the fish with any more bait than what I need to. So the two ingredients what we're going to be using along with the ground bait is molehill soil and lean. Now molehill soil is as what it is. It's from the banks, molehills. Best way of actually getting the molehill soil, because the moles do the job for you. They fine it down. So you end up with a really nice fine mix once it's been passed through a riddle. And of course, it's a neutral ingredient. Now, you can't actually use this on its own. You need something to bind with it. So what I do is I mix 50% lean and soil mixed together. So here we have damp lean. Now, again, this is something that is, you can use it for separating your joker, adding to your ground bait, and the ground bait will help bind it, but on its own, it needs that binder. So, as well as actually using it in the initial feed, we'll be using these two mixes combined, 50-50, for topping our swim up with. And then, at least when we're topping up with neat joker, because these are neutral ingredients. And then by, what that means is we're not taking the risk of adding ground bait later on, and all of a sudden we go back out of topping a swim up with ground bait and we can't get a bite. At least we're just covering our back by feeding neutral ingredients with the joker, so we're not putting our swim at risk. A general rule with fishing is you can always put it in, but you can't take it out. So always take it one step at a time, especially when the water's so cold. So what I want to do is, if I'm doing a ratio of 70%, 30%, it's quite easy really. I've got a spare bucket here. So if I want to put 10 balls in through 2 lines, today I'm going to be feeding 2 areas of my swim, which will be 7 metres and 13 metres. So I want to put 5 balls in on each line. So what I'm doing is making 10 balls up, combined with the mixers. So obviously that will be 7 balls of ground bait and 3 balls of lean mixed together, lean and soil mixed together. And that will make the full 100%. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, that's my 7 balls. Just give it a whisk again. Get rid of any lumps. Now it's starting to dry out a bit, so this is where we just need to add a little bit more water to it. Right, so that's that. Now, Lehman soil. Again, 50-50. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the best way of measuring your mixes out, so you get in equal quantities. Now, I'm going to be using this for topping up with, so I'll add a little bit more for later on when I want to top a ball up as well. I've got this mix ready. Now, this mixed together, it's very dry, so it needs a binder. And the best binder to use is grey lean. Now, a lot of people get confused with this. They use this for separating a joker, which is good for canals and places like that, where the water's really shallow and clear and you just want to feed joker on its own. But today we're fishing in 9 foot of water. So I'm using grey lean as a binder. Brilliant way of just really coagulating everything together So it's a really, really stiff mixer, this. So I like to measure it, and which means you can regulate how you can obtain a stiffer mix or not a stiffer mix by, obviously, if I've added 1 cup of this and it's not binding enough, I can add a bit more, and then you've got that in the back of your mind, and you know next time you go out, you know exactly how much to add, rather than just getting a pinch full and adding it. You're measuring your amounts, and you're working to a bit more like a recipe, a bit more of a system. So 1 cup, in fact we'll add a little bit more, 1.5. Now what I don't like to do is whisk this, because it's so dry. What you'll find is you go to whisk it and it'll come flying out. So just mix it with my hand, and then once it's binded, started to actually mix in, then you can get the whisk to it. Now already it's starting to bind. And that's just from the moisture of the molehill soil. Obviously, the damp leam holds a bit of moisture, but the soil holds a lot more. And then to fine tune it, all I want to do is atomise it. Just a little bit of moisture. And just shake it about. And one last whisk. Just to remove everything from the sides. And you end up with, as you can see, only have to squeeze it like that, and it's like solid. That is how good grey leam is. It's absolutely brilliant. So what I want to do now, out of that mix, is add 3 balls into this mix. And there we have 70%, 30%. All that needs doing with that now is we need to put it through a riddle, just to get rid of any lumps, put some air into the mix and just fluff it up a bit, just make it a bit more neater, which means no matter how hard we squeeze it, those neutral ingredients will dissolve in the water and break down the mix a lot quicker. So, what I want to talk about now is the joker, the main bait for today. So here we have it. Joker and bloodworm. Now this joker you can buy from your local tackle shop, order it at this time of the year. It's a seasonal bait that you can easily get hold of in the winter months. Gets shipped over from, brought over from Russia or Poland during the cold months. So you can get it all year round, but it's easy to get in the winter. I get mine off Sam Wildsmith, a brilliant bait supplier, really good quality bait. Bloodworm as well, comes in a match pack, and just as long as you order in advance, you can get hold of it on a weekly basis. This is like caviar to the fish. They love it. You can tell just by looking at it, the colour of it. Once that's on the bottom, fish are drawn, not just because of the activity of it, but the colour of it. It's just so bright in colour. It just draws fish into your swim straight away. Absolutely perfect for what we want to use it for today, which is catching a nice net of roach. So what we want to do with this is we want to separate it. So what I want to do is not separate it all. So take out a handful, and with that I'm just going to add some damp leam that's already riddled. As you can see, it's starting to break up now. What you've got to make sure is that the joker's nice and dry. What you'll find is when you buy it in the shops, it might have been in a newspaper for a couple of days and it's damp. take it out of that old newspaper, put it in fresh newspaper so that newspaper absorbs all any excess moisture. So you end up with quite dry joker, and that means you don't then have to add as much lean to the mix to actually break it up. Now, it's that cold this morning that it's lying quite dormant, and usually when you break up joker at this point, you'll see it. In fact, you can see it starting to move now. It's usually bouncing about, but it's just so cold this morning. But the key point is that you're separating it and you're not feeding any clumps of joker. It's all individually separated. And the best way to finish it off is chuck it in one of these buckets like this and just give it a shake around. And that's what you end up with. Just separated joker, and you can just see it's all separated now. The odd lump there, but it'll separate in a bit. Now, Bloodworm, exactly the same, but bigger. And this is what we'll be using on the hook. We're only going to be using one Bloodworm at a time on the hook. It's not a case of putting, you know, there are situations where you can fish for the bigger fish by putting a load of them on a hook, maybe 6 or 7 Bloodworm on a big hook. But today we're going to be fishing a small hook, a single worm, and just having a good day's fishing, getting loads of bites, catching a load of small fish, you know, and it's a real rewarding day's fishing. At this time of the year, when it's as cold as what it is today, we're still going to get plenty of bites. And this is what this session is about: enjoying your fishing, getting the most out of your ground baits, and just understanding how to use joker a little bit more. What I need to do now my bait's ready, I've plummeted up, got everything ready, I need to add my joker to my mix and then make my balls and feed my peg. So, as I said, I showed you earlier, all the joker separated, but I want to measure it out. These pots, 250 mil. So obviously it's a good way of regulating how much bait you're putting into your feed initially. So, you know, you can work on how your peg goes. And as well, when you go on your next visit to your canal, you can remember exactly the amount that you've added to your mix if it's worked well. And if it hasn't, then you can try adding more, just fine-tuning those little things, sticking to, let's say, your recipe amounts, and it just helps you know exactly what you're doing with your swim. So, this cup, full to the brim, 250 ml of joker into my balls. Give it a nice mix around like that. And now I'm going to make my balls up. All my balls are ready. As you can see, loads of feed in the balls, nice bright red joker sticking out of the ground bait. That's what jaws are fishing. I'm going to feed the peg and start fishing. Got my Bloodworm on. Let's have a go for a first cast, see if we can get one first cast. I'm going to start on my long line first. Just wait for my bolt to get underneath where my float wants to be. And then just start really slowly lowering the rigging. Obviously, if you try to do this in a rush, you just end up in a tangle with your heavy droppers. So when you get to this point, just let all your rig straighten up and then start slowly lowering it. Float settles. Go on, go under. Oh, missed a bite. Do the process again. Lift bite, fish on. And that is the beauty about using big droppers. As we load that rig in, the droppers allowed us to tell that there was a fish taking the bait as we lowered it in. First fish of the day. Well, I think that's the last fish of the day. Had a cracking day fishing, although it's been really, really cold. Had to suffer with ice floating through the peg, leaves, everything. It's been a bit of a nightmare. The canal's really pushed the ice through, and I think considering the conditions and how cold it's been, we've had a lovely day's fishing. Caught fish off both lines. Obviously it made a big difference when I topped my swim up and everything, and caught a better stamp of roach. So, you know, it's all gone quite well really, considering how cold it's been. So let's have a look, see what weight I've got. Right, well, we've finished the session. Lovely net of fish, 6 or 7 pound. Had a really rewarding day considering how cold it's been. And I just hope that, you know, you've learnt a lot from what I've shown you, and that you can go out and put it to use next time when it's as cold as this. And hopefully I'll see you soon on the bankside.